Hello and welcome to HITC Sevens, and to today's video, which is all about new signings who made the biggest and most immediate impacts within the world of football. It is a theme which ought to be fresh in all of our minds, with a handful of high-profile recent examples. Bruno Fernandes might be the most readily recognisable case within the English game over the last 12 months, having had a transformative impact at Old Trafford. Meanwhile, it was only a few seasons ago that Mohamed Salah had one of the finest seasons in living memory by someone who isn't called Messi or Ronaldo during his debut campaign at Liverpool. If we cast our net out a little further, just take a look at the impact that Zlatan Ibrahimovic has had since his return to the San Siro, despite being older than that ground itself. Meanwhile, you may recall that Diego Milito scored 30 goals in his debut campaign with Inter Milan, playing a talismanic role as the Nerazzurri lifted a historic treble less than 12 months on from his arrival from Genoa. Hopefully I am setting the scene in terms of the type of impacts that I'm interested in, and to be honest, there were so many candidates that stripping it down to 7 was a near enough impossible task. So yes, the player who you think of that I missed, I might not actually have missed, I just somehow had to narrow it down to 7. A big thank you to Addit on Instagram for the suggestion, and without further ado, I shall get underway. Here are 7 new signings who had enormous, immediate impacts at their new clubs. Sergio Aguero at Manchester City. There are a handful of players, from David Silva to Yaya Toure, and perhaps even Robinho, that people will look to as having been the seminal moment in which Manchester City announced themselves as a force within the English and European games. Cases can be made for all 3, but for me, Aguero was the one that left the biggest impression. The young Argentine had been ripping it up with Atletico Madrid, and his signature was the one that every chief executive and club president wanted to secure. Real Madrid and Barcelona were the inevitable favourites at one stage, but in the end, Aguero joined a rising force outside of mainland Europe. Everyone knew Manchester City had the funds to sign someone like Aguero, but the fact that they had the required pull raised eyebrows. On his debut, it was immediately obvious that Manchester City had signed one of the best forwards in the world. I can remember watching that game live as though it were yesterday. It had been a relatively cagey affair between the citizens and a neat and well-organised newly promoted Swansea City side until Aguero was introduced close to the hour mark. He scored twice and assisted another, marking his debut with a 4-0 win, including a terrific long-range strike. Aguero went on to score 30 goals that season, including one of the most famous goals of all time, in injury time, against Queen's Park Rangers, to rob Manchester United of the Premier League title and ensure that the noisy neighbours really had something to shout about. That was Man City's first top-flight league title in over 40 years, and without Aguero, it simply would not have been possible. He's gone on to bag 256 goals in 379 games for the club, becoming Man City's all-time leading goalscorer. Jair da Costa at Inter Milan. The most unfortunate international footballer of all time in some respects, Jair da Costa spent the first half of his career with Garrincha for competition on the right flank for Brazil, and the second half battering for a place up against Jairzinho. As such, he only ever won 1 cap. He would have been a nailed-on starter for virtually every other national team for a decade. Jair might not have been on quite the same level as Garrincha and Jairzinho, but he wasn't too far behind, and that is high praise indeed. Born in Sao Paulo, Jair began his career with Portuguesa, before he was signed by Italian outfit Inter Milan at the age of 22. Inter were an ever-improving side under Argentine disciplinarian Helenio Herrera, blessed with great players like Jacinto Facchetti, Luis Suarez, and Sandro Mazzola, but they were still without a Scudetto in almost a decade. Their talented, organised machine needed an injection of pace and flair, and Jair arrived with bags of both. Following patchy form at the start of the 1962-63 campaign, Inter lost just 2 games all season after Jair arrived, going on to lift the Serie A title 4 points clear of Juventus. That ensured qualification for the following season's European Cup, which Inter also won for the first time under Herrera, not once, but twice, recording back-to-back European titles, with Jair playing a key role on both occasions. Juan Roman Riquelme at Boca Juniors. One of the best midfielders on the planet from the late 1990s through to the mid to late 2000s, Juan Roman Riquelme was a mercurial Argentine playmaker who refused to adapt his style for anyone. That led to 1 or 2 run-ins during his time in Europe, but at Boca Juniors, where he was given the freedom to do as he pleased, he proved what a special player he was. Riquelme spent 6 inspired seasons at La Bombonera prior to his move to Spain, where he played a key role in 2 Copa Libertadores titles. Boca had never stopped keeping tabs on their former talisman, but with Riquelme starring for Villarreal, a return to the Argentine capital didn't seem imminent. However, in 2007, Riquelme had a fallout with Manuel Pellegrini, and Boca didn't hang about. Riquelme reportedly played for free during his loan spell back at his boyhood club, and he played with a childlike spirit whilst returning to his dominant best. In the Copa Libertadores that season, Riquelme arguably played the best football of his entire career, eclipsing the standards he had set at the turn of the millennium. A good Boca team became borderline unbeatable, with Riquelme inspiring a semi-final comeback in Buenos Aires before scoring in both legs of the final, bagging 3 goals in total as Boca beat Gremio 5-0 on aggregate. Boca were South American champions, and Riquelme was named as the competition's best player, in one of the easiest decisions anyone is ever likely to make. Riquelme returned to Boca on a permanent basis at the end of the season, retiring at the club in 2014, as one of the greatest players in the history of one of the world's greatest football clubs. Gerd Müller at Bayern Munich. This may take some time to wrap your head around if you're not familiar with the history of German football, but when Gerd Müller joined Bayern Munich, the Bavarians were competing in the second tier of German football. Germany's regional leagues were only consolidated into a national league in 1963 with the creation of the Bundesliga, and Bayern narrowly missed out to neighbours 1860 Munich, so they had to start out in the second tier. Gerd Müller, meanwhile, spent that first year of nationalised football playing for a team called Nordlingen in Germany's 7th tier. The teenager scored 47 goals in 28 games, ensuring that the Minnows were crowned as league champions, but that didn't stop him joining Bayern Munich during the off-season. The Bavarians had just missed out on promotion in 1963-64 to KSV Hessen-Kassel, a team who are now semi-professional, but the arrival of Müller ensured that Bayern would have too much firepower to be stopped the following season. Müller seemingly didn't notice any difference between the 7th and 2nd tiers, scoring 39 goals in just 32 games in a Bayern team that averaged better than 4 goals a game across the entire campaign. Promotion was secured, and Bayern could begin building to become Germany's biggest club. Müller would be at the heart of that future success, scoring 563 goals in 605 games, but it is his vital immediate impact that earns him a spot in this 7. Eric Cantona at Manchester United. Eric Cantona's impact at Manchester United upon his arrival is the stuff of legend. King Eric, as he would become known, had always had an aura about him. Though his feisty personality and occasional ill discipline had made Leeds United deem him expendable, Cantona's attitude and application on the training ground gave everyone at Manchester United a much-needed lift. Of course, his antics still reared their head during the Frenchman's time at Old Trafford, but Alex Ferguson has long maintained that without him, there are no guarantees that United would have won that first league championship, let alone become the dominant force within the English game as they did. Ferguson had been on the lookout for a centre-forward following a leg break to recent arrival Dion Dublin, and news of Cantona's availability came about as a consequence of Leeds making an ill-fated inquiry surrounding Dennis Irwin's availability. He wasn't for sale, but apparently Cantona was, and all for only £1.2 million. Cantona arrived in November 1992, and it would prove to be one of United's wisest investments of all time. The Red Devils had actually made an awful start to the inaugural Premier League season with just 5 wins from their opening 15 games. From November onwards, they lost just 2 games all season, capitalising on a lack of real form anywhere else in the division to climb to the top of the league and end up winning the title by a whopping 10 points. Cantona scored 9 goals in 22 outings, but more importantly, he had lifted the dressing room and provided that inspiration and magic whenever the club needed it. Manchester United had their first top flight league title since the mid-1960s, and a dynasty had been born. Johan Cruyff at Barcelona. There have been a handful of players who have made remarkable instant impacts at Barcelona over the years, and the Catalan Giants could do with another one at this moment in time. Barca may have suffered a rare season without a trophy in 2019-20, but back when Johan Cruyff arrived at the Camp Nou, the club was in the midst of a trophy drought of far greater magnitude than that. The year was 1973, and Barcelona hadn't won the La Liga title since the 1959-60 campaign, some 14 years ago. Drastic action was required, so the club decided to go out and sign the best player on the planet. That man was Johan Cruyff, who had just guided Ajax to 3 consecutive European Cup titles as the star man in a team packed full of talent. Cruyff was only 26 at the time, but he was already half player, half manager, and his impact went beyond his ability with the ball at his feet. He set Barcelona back a world record fee, almost doubling the existing record that had been set 5 years ago, but he would justify every penny of that investment. Under his old boss Rinus Michels, Cruyff was the talisman once again. He scored 24 goals in 38 games in his debut campaign, in addition to convincing those around him that Barcelona were capable of winning the league. If they didn't believe him at first, then they would do after a Cruyff masterclass inspired a 5-0 win against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. In the end, Barca won the league by 10 points, and though it didn't prompt an era of dominance, it was a remarkable immediate impact, and Cruyff would later inspire an era of Barca dominance from behind the scenes. Alfredo Di Stefano at Real Madrid. As I said at the beginning, there were loads of players who made incredible immediate impacts that I just as easily could have picked ahead of those that I actually did, but whoever I went with in the 7, I was never in any doubt as to top spot. If you're a long-term subscriber to this channel, then you will know more about Alfredo Di Stefano than most. And if you're not, well, why not subscribe right at this moment before searching for HITC Sevens Di Stefano to watch the 15-minute documentary film that I made last year about the great man himself. Alfredo Di Stefano revolutionised football in more ways than one, but perhaps his greatest legacy was in shifting the power of not just Spanish, but European football in favour of Real Madrid. When Di Stefano joined Los Blancos following a bitter transfer battle involving 3 different parties, including Real's fiercest rivals Barcelona, Real hadn't won the La Liga title since way before World War II. Di Stefano joined the club in 1952, 20 years since the club had last lifted the trophy, and they were without a trophy of any kind for the last 6 seasons. On his debut, Di Stefano scored a hat-trick as Real beat Barcelona 5-0. He went on to score 27 goals in 28 games that season, as Real won their first La Liga title in 2 decades. Di Stefano was a one-of-a-kind, perplexing spectators by dropping all the way back into defence in order to receive the ball, building attacks from the back. The blonde arrow, as he was known, would pierce through the hearts of all those he faced over the next 10 years, turning Real Madrid into 5-time European champions. No player has ever made such an immediate and telling short-term impact upon arriving at a club, nor has any single player ever had such a lasting long-term impact upon the fate, standing and stature of a football club. Any discussion regarding the greatest footballers of all time isn't complete until Di Stefano's name has at least been mentioned. So that's it for today's video. I could just as easily have featured Diego Maradona's first season at Napoli, Ronaldinho's start to life at Barcelona, or Robin van Persie's immediate impact upon signing for Manchester United, but I had to whittle it down to 7 somehow. Thank you all as ever for watching, give us a like if you did enjoy today's video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. Oh, and you can also find me on Twitter or Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens should you wish to do so.